All right, I believe we are live. For the record, Delegate Jazz Lewis here for the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee of Appropriations. Thank you all for coming to Annapolis today. It's a lot warmer than it's been, so I'm sure it was a more pleasant trip. We have 5 agencies that we are going to be hearing from today. We're going to start with Department of State Police. So, Ms. Miller, can you approach, and we'll have DLS analysis. After that, I'll ask our leader, Mr. Butler, Colonel Butler, to speak, and then we'll work through the list. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Lewis and committee. My name is Madeline Miller, and today I'll be presenting the DLS budget analysis for the Department of State Police. Between fiscal 25 and 26, the department's budget increases by $47.4 million to $668.9 million. Most, about 92%, of that growth can be attributed to personnel salary enhancements. Performance analysis for the department begins on page 4 with a discussion of crime rates. The department is responsible for collecting crime data and compiling it into the state's Uniform Crime Report. Data from Maryland's Summary Reporting System metrics is compared to national data in Exhibit 1 on page 5. There were 2,414 Part 1 offenses per 100,000 people in Maryland in calendar 23, a 16.6% increase compared with calendar 22. Part 1 crimes include murder, rape, aggravated assault, robbery, burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, and arson. The increase between years was largely driven by growth in property crimes, which are breaking and entering, larceny, and motor vehicle theft, which increased by 19.7% between calendar 22 and 23. Though Maryland's overall crime rate measured using the SRS methodology rose between calendar 21 and 23, the murder rate fell in that period by 20%. As shown in Exhibit 2, Maryland's murder rate was higher than the national rate over the past decade, though both have declined compared to their 2021 levels. Maryland's rate has fallen from its pre-pandemic level, though that is not yet true at the national level. Information related to traffic fatalities begins on page 7. Traffic enforcement is a chief responsibility of the department. Though travel decreased during calendar 2020 due to the pandemic, the number of fatalities did not. And the number of annual vehicle miles traveled fell by 15.9%, while traffic fatalities rose by 7.1%. As shown in Exhibit 3, which is on page 7, the traffic fatality rate per 100 million vehicle miles traveled increased by approximately 27% to 1.13 fatalities in that period. By calendar 23, vehicle miles traveled increased to 57.5 billion, though this remains 4.4% lower than the 2019 peak. In calendar 23, there were 621 fatalities, leading to a fatality rate that was 8.7% higher than the rate in 2022. Resources published online by the Maryland Department of Transportation estimate that the number of traffic fatalities in calendar 24 was 572, which would represent a 7.9% decrease compared with the number of fatalities in calendar 23. Between 2014 and 2023, the average number of fatalities was approximately 541.1 per year, or 5.4% lower than the MDOT estimate for calendar 24. In 2023, there were 621 fatalities and 120 impairment-related fatal collisions. Fatal collisions may have more than one associated death. Exhibit 4 on page 9 details the number of arrests by the Department of State Police and other law enforcement agencies in the state, along with the number of impairment-related fatal collisions per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. The rate of impairment-related fatal collisions has returned to its pre-pandemic data in calendar 23 and estimated 2024 data, even as fewer DUI arrests have been made. The total number of DUI arrests across all Maryland police agencies fell by approximately 6,000 arrests, or 23% in calendar 2020 compared with 2019. Since calendar 21, DUI arrests have not surpassed the 2020 level, with an average of 18,713 arrests being made in calendar 22 through 24 estimated data. The last exhibit related to performance analysis appears on page 10. This exhibit shows the number of fire prevention inspections and re-inspections conducted by the Office of the State Fire Marshal and the rate of fire-related deaths per 100,000 people. Between calendar 2020 and estimated calendar 24 data, the number of inspections performed by OSFM rose by 74.7% to 12,500. Since calendar 2019, the rate of fire-related deaths has increased from 1.08 to 1.36 in calendar 23. That's an increase of 25.9%. There were 84 people killed in fire-related incidents in 2023. The department estimates this figure will fall by approximately 14.3% to 72 in calendar 24. The discussion of the fiscal 25 and 26 budgets begins on page 11. The working appropriation includes 2 cost containment actions approved by the Board of Public Works in July 2024 and a few proposed deficiencies. One cost containment action reduced general funds for the computer forensics laboratory by approximately $1.5 million. The second reduced the general fund appropriation by approximately $300,000 and shifted the cost of 3 emergency dispatcher positions to the Maryland Emergency Medical Systems Operations Fund. That special fund is traditionally used to support 80% of the costs associated with the Maryland State Police Aviation Command, or MSPAC. Turning to the deficiencies, one would add approximately $6.4 million to the Field Operations Bureau to support health insurance costs and recognize additional revenue from reimbursable overtime invoices. One would swap $5.5 million in general funds for $5.5 million would swap $5.5 million in general funds for a same amount in special funds from the MEMSOF, contingent on provision in the BRFA that expands the allowable uses of the MEMSOF to include the general operations of MSPAC. The third would swap approximately $1 million in general funds with special funds from the Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division, and this would support cadet positions. Exhibit 6 on page 12 shows the fiscal 2026 allowance by program. Of the $668.9 million allowance, personnel costs represent 81.8% of expenditure. By program, the Office of the Superintendent makes up 7.5% of the allowance. This category also includes costs for legislative security, the Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center, and Baltimore Regional Intelligence Center. The Field Operations Bureau receives 47.5% of the allowance. The Field Operations Bureau also accounts for the largest share of DSP's personnel, with about 1,334 regular positions and contractual full-time equivalents. The Criminal Investigations Bureau directs the investigative and forensics operations of the department and represents about 17.2% of the allowance. The Support Services Bureau receives about a quarter, and the Vehicle Theft Prevention Council, which assists in the prevention of vehicle theft and other vehicle-related crimes, receives about 0.5% of the total allowance. The Office of the State Fire Marshal accounts for 2.1%. Exhibit 7 on pages 14 and 15 details the reasons for the department's budget increasing between fiscal years. As mentioned previously, most of the increase can be explained with various personnel actions. One area with offsetting increases and decreases is funding for MCAC. MCAC provides analytical support and disseminates information in support of law enforcement, public health, public safety, and homeland security. Paired with a decrease in software maintenance costs for MCAC, the department reports that this center requires additional office space and that a lease will be acquired in the same building which MCAC currently operates in. That space will need to be renovated and equipped with furniture, hardware, and other equipment. Though Exhibit 7 indicates MSPAC expenditures will increase by $1.5 million for helicopter maintenance and repair, that is not the only change to MSPAC spending. In fiscal 25, the budget includes a higher special fund ratio to general funds than is typical. Because the MEMSOF supports the medically oriented mission of MSPAC, the special fund typically contributed 80%, based on the ratio of medically oriented functions to non-medical ones. In recent fiscal years, the general fund was required to contribute more than 20% of costs as actions were taken to improve the health of the MEMSOF. The funding split from fiscal 22 through 26 is shown in Exhibit 8 on page 17. Between fiscal 21 and 24, the cost of administering MSPAC rose 34.9%. DLS notes that total costs may be under budgeted in fiscal 25 and 26, as even with the $1.5 million in helicopter repair and maintenance cost, this category is budgeted at 47.9% and 32.3% lower than in fiscal 25 and 26 than it was in fiscal 24 actual costs. As introduced, a provision in the BRFA would allow MEMSA funds to support the general operations of MSPAC in fiscal 25 and 26. The language in the provision does not limit the amount that can be used for general operations in these 2 years. However, language in the budget bill limits this amount to $5.5 million. The allowance does not reflect a change for the Vehicle Theft Prevention Council or the Maryland Sheriff's Association grant, as discussed on pages 17 and 18. The Vehicle Theft Prevention Council has a higher fiscal 26 expenditures in the allowance than it intends to spend. So the allowance includes $3.3 million in grant spending, the same level provided in fiscal 25. The department only plans to expend $2.6 million in each year. DLS therefore recommends a reduction in fiscal 26 in the special fund amount to reflect the anticipated expenditure level. The allowance also includes $333,000 for the Maryland Sheriff's Association grant, as was provided in fiscal 23 through 25. This grant is not mandated, but spending was only planned for fiscal 23 through 25. Since the funding was not planned, DLS recommends deleting the general fund appropriation. The discussion of personnel data begins at the bottom of page 18. The allowance includes an increase of 15.5 regular positions for the department, including 15 new trooper cadet positions in the Field Operations Bureau, which began in fiscal 25, and 0.5 regular positions for the Office of the State Fire Marshal. Cadets are individuals who are hired before they are eligible to participate in the Trooper Academy. There are 26 trooper cadet positions in the working appropriation, 11 of which are vacant as of December 31st, 2024, and 3 of which have been vacant for over a year. The addition of the 15 new positions and the reclassifying of 4 positions between fiscal years means that there will be 45 trooper cadet positions in fiscal 26. Cadet positions are added via deficiency appropriation, and funding associated with that action in special funds is continued in the fiscal 26 allowance. The allowance also includes $1.1 million in new funding for these 15 positions. DLS recommends reducing the special fund appropriation by approximately $1 million in fiscal 26 to eliminate this double count. DLS also recommends deleting the 15 new vacant positions due to the availability of existing vacant positions. Of the department's 285 vacancies, approximately 60% have been vacant for over a year, and 29 have never been filled. Approximately 59 regular positions have been vacant since prior to January 1st, 2023. Today, the department should comment on its aging position count and identify any plans to fill, reclassify, or abolish positions that have not been filled in over 24 months. The issues section begins on page 20 with the discussion of multiple topics related to personnel. In July 22, the Department of Justice announced it would be investigating the department to determine if the department's hiring and promotional practices had violated Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. A consent decree was filed in October 24 and provisionally approved in the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland in November of 2024. In the consent decree, the department agrees to use lawful tests for the applicants and to provide $2.75 million in monetary awards. The department also agrees to make priority hiring awards for up to 25 applicants who were previously unfairly disqualified but have successfully completed the new process. Final approval of the consent decree will be considered by the court in March. To comply with the consent decree, the state police has brought 2 items to the Board of Public Works. The first was the monetary award, and then in just January of 2025, the Board of Public Works also approved the use of approximately $360,000 in general funds to be used by the department to procure 2 entry-level selection tests to replace the existing written and physical fitness tests. The anticipated delivery date for these is July 1. The department has received fewer applicants than meet its minimum processing standards since calendar 2020, as shown in Exhibit 9 on page 21. Between 2015 and 2020, the average number of applicants that met the minimum standard per Trooper Academy class was 3,241. In 2022, the average number fell to 673, though it increased to 2,103 in calendar 23. Applicants must meet additional qualifications, and eventual class sizes are much lower. The average starting class size for the application rounds was approximately 42 candidates in calendars 2015 through 2024. During that period, an average of 36 candidates graduated from the 16 classes offered, as shown in Exhibit 10 on page 22. Though the department may be receiving fewer qualified applicants for sworn positions, it maintains a lower vacancy rate among its sworn personnel, as shown in Exhibit 11 on page 23. Between calendar 16 and 2020, the department operated with an average of 10.1% of its sworn and civilian positions vacant, while the vacancy rate for sworn personnel decreased to 6.7% in 2022 following the graduation of 85 troopers. The vacancy rate for civilian positions continued to rise, reaching 17%. The department estimates that the overall vacancy rate was 10.8% in calendar 24, while the budgeted turnover rate is set to 8.7% in fiscal 25. Civilian personnel are also more diverse in race and gender than its sworn personnel. During the 2021 session, the General Assembly expressed concerns about allegations of racial insensitivity and a lack of diversity among the state police workforce. In continuing to monitor the department's progress in addressing this issue, the committee has requested an update on the further development and implementation of the Workforce Diversity Action Plan in the 2022 and 2023 Joint Chairman's reports. In response to these findings from focus group discussions moderated by Morgan State University in calendar 22 and 23, State Police plan to launch a second phase of its workforce assessment study. In November of 23, it also launched a foundational stakeholder project, an effort to gather feedback from frontline employees of the department regarding recruiting, performance, promotions, transfers, and improving state police operations. It was the first of 5 projects in the Performance Perspectives program planned for fiscal 24 and 25. In its testimony, DSP should update the committees on its progress in implementing the second phase of the Workforce Assessment Study and Performance Perspectives program. Issue 2 appears on page 24. Approximately 1 year ago, the Office of Legislative Audits released a fiscal compliance audit for DSP covering May 21st, 2018 through May 31st, 2022. In its response to OLA, DSP reported that corrective actions for 2 of the findings would be completed by December of 2024. The department has made progress on addressing these findings and reports that one of the backlogs was eliminated in November of 24. It was able to eliminate this backlog by forming a task force with members assigned to quality control processing as their primary duties. Another backlog is expected to be complete by the end of January 25. A memorandum of understanding has also been signed with DPSCS in order to address these findings. The third and final issue appears on page 25. The department reports that 2 law enforcement agencies that contribute data to the Crime in Maryland Uniform Crime Report have not yet become compliant with the federal reporting system. Non-compliant agencies contribute to the department, requiring additional time to process and require data that is due to the department be submitted by November 1st of each year. Language in last year's budget restricted funds pending the submission of the 2023 UCR. The department submitted the data verification letter on November 4th and the UCR on December 23rd of 2024. DLS therefore recommends the release of withheld funds and will process a letter to this effect if no objections are raised by the committees during the budget hearings. The committees may wish to restrict funding for the annual report again and adopt this annual language. DLS recommends adding annual budget language restricting funds pending the receipt of the 2024 UCR. That recommendation, along with the others, are provided beginning on page 26 of this document. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Colleagues, any questions for DLS? Seeing none, Secretary, you and your team can approach. Begin when you are ready.
Good afternoon, Chairman Lewis and members of the committee. For the record, I am Colonel Roland L. Butler, Jr., Secretary of the Maryland Department of State Police. It is my pleasure to appear before you to respond to the issues raised and the recommendations contained in our budget and analysis prepared by DLS analyst Madeline Miller. Thank you, Madeline, for your thorough analysis and your professionalism. With me today is Mr. John Wilhelm, our Chief Financial Officer, and some of the department's senior leaders. Also in attendance is Acting State Fire Marshal Jason Mowbray, as well as the Office of the State Fire Marshal's most recent graduate, Deputy Fire Marshal Sierra Hawkins. I'm particularly proud of Deputy Hawkins' accomplishments and highlight that she is the first African-American female to hold the Deputy State Fire Marshal position in this agency's 130-year history. Last year, I shared that my focus since being appointed to this position has been on our family, those who will join the MSP family particularly. I've used the analogy of moving into a new home and refining the structure to best house a family. We're continuing to do just that at the MDSP. Policies, procedures, and systems are being refined to continue to improve the home that is our agency. The Maryland Department of State Police Families continues to serve the residents of the state by upholding the charge given to us by the public and the legislature. We have and will continue to serve and protect those who live, work, and visit the great state of Maryland every day. The most recent months and days have been filled with success. While it is truly impossible to summarize all of the great work that our team has done and it continues to do, I do have a couple of examples that I would like to share. Our Maryland Car Rally Task Force has made strides in addressing illegal exhibition driving. In 2024, the task force responded to 72 car rally events, resulting in 53 arrests. Just this past weekend, the media highlighted MDSP's efforts associated with disrupting 7 large-scale illegal car rally events. Many of those events have taken place in our metropolitan regions, including Prince George's County and Baltimore City. MDSP's Criminal Enforcement Division is making strides to curb handgun violence incidents and addressing road rage incidents involving firearms. In 2025, to date, 27 cases have been investigated, 9 arrests have been made with 7 firearms being seized. Recruitment efforts are now paying off. On Monday, February 24th, the 159th Trooper Candidate Academy class began with 53 candidates. We currently have 51 candidates remaining in the class. Monday, we intend to add 2 additional candidates. This is our largest class that we've seated in the last 4.5 years. Graduation is currently scheduled for August 29th, and each of you are more than welcome to attend. Respect and trust with our local communities is paramount. We actively seek and welcome feedback from those who we interact with. Our public opinion survey posted on our website in 2024 received 300 responses, a 30% increase over our 2023 responses. 64% of the responses rated their experience with the Maryland Department of State Police as excellent, and 65% rated the attitude of our troopers as excellent. Whether it was the kindness and respect displayed by a trooper during a traffic stop, or the safety and security provided during a chaotic scene, the feedback indicates our troopers are going above and beyond the call of duty. Some of the days in the past year have been unique, unprecedented, and extremely challenging. The Maryland Department of State Police's team's response to the catastrophic events at both the Francis Scott Key Bridge and the crash at Ronald Reagan National Airport are amongst them. Our underwater recovery team, also known as the dive team, and our incident management team were key players in both events, assisting with the search and rescue and recovery operations in partnership with allied agencies. While other elements of the MDSP family assisted with support, every person pitched in to accomplish the mission. These 2 events bring to mind a very important portion of what we're doing and how we're proactively addressing the needs of our family and the citizens of Maryland. The Maryland State Police Mental Health Crisis and Services Program is robust, and it is staffed to support our members and to assist them with their needs in mental health and wellness. We'll always continue to improve this program Highlights of our recent efforts include a $185,000 law enforcement mental health and wellness grant from the Department of Justice's Community-Oriented Policing Services Office. In addition, the MDSP's alliances and partnership around our nation are also on display, as evident by our recent engagement with the Collaborative Reform Initiative Technical Assistance Center, a partnership between the International Association of Chiefs of Police and the COPS Office. MDSP is actively working to obtain both consultation and training in the area of mental health and wellness as we continue on the path as Maryland's premier law enforcement agency, focusing on what matters most: our people, our personnel. Refining our management and investment strategies to advance the agency's mission continues, especially with the advances made with our P3 program, Performance Perspectives program. While our work is far from over, the MDSP has made significant efforts to better our capabilities to serve the citizens of the state. Our written testimony provides detailed specifics regarding our responses to the DLS recommended actions. Specifically, first, we respectfully do not concur with the DLS recommended action of the reduction of $690,724 in special funds in fiscal year 2026 to the Vehicle Theft Prevention Council Fund. We ask that those funds remain in the budget to allow us the flexibility to fund local agencies and their vehicle theft initiatives. Second, after additional communications with our DLS analysts and more in-depth review, we respectfully partially concur with the DLS recommendation to reduce the special fund appropriation by $1,047,270 in fiscal 26. We do not concur with the deletion of the 15 pens. As noted in our response, the department has reclassified 10 pens that are funded by general funds. 15 pens are new pens funded by special funds, and we request that we be able to keep those pens. The Maryland Department of State Police continues to expand and rely on its cadet program for future recruiting efforts, as this program focuses on hiring young people between the ages of 18 to 20 prior to their eligibility to become a Maryland State Trooper. As I mentioned, with the 159th class, we have 12 cadets that went from cadet to trooper candidate. We have one additional cadet that left the cadet program, attended college for a year, and made their way back to the MSP family. Lastly, we concur with the DLS recommendation to release the withheld funds associated with the submission of the Uniform Crime Report and the recommendation of the budget language restricting funds pending the receipt of the 2024 URC report. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak and discuss our operating budget. Mr. Chair, my team and I are happy to answer any questions you and your committee members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Always a pleasure seeing you. Members of the committee, do you have any questions? Delegate Stanko.
Quick question. The cost of a cadet per person, what is that equal to?
I do not have that. I could get that for you. But again, I'd like to stress the cadets go through a mini academy, and just like we have the 53 that started on Monday, we have 12 additional cadets in there right now. And the beauty of that is they're starting their careers very early. They're contributing to a retirement. In 25 years, starting at the age of 18, they're eligible for retirement. And I think it's a robust program. The ideal is that they all become state troopers. But if they don't, they go out into the trades. They go out into any other profession. We've mentored them to be upstanding citizens, and we hope that in a time of crisis or just a time where they need a little bit of guidance, they'll fall back to that supervisor they were working for and ask those tough questions. We all know life for young people is about making the right choices. We want to be that conduit to ensure that they make the right choices.
Appreciate that. I'm curious, probably take away for the committee and doing some research. I'm curious what our per person cost is to the governor's Governor's Office of Service. And so just something I want to kind of apples to apples. If we have a piece on that, we should take a look at that and see what that math looks like, and if there's a way that those funds could be shared. Thanks.
Delia, just to clarify, you're referring to the Governor's Service Year Option Program versus the cadet program?
Correct.
Okay.
Maybe a shared cost.
Wonderful. Mr. Secretary, you said that you disagreed with removing $690,000 from the Vehicle Theft Prevention Council. Can you talk to us about what that would mean. In Prince George's County, we have a lot of carjackings and vehicle theft taking place. My car was broken into in front of my parents' house a few years ago, so. if you could
I'm
speak
sorry
to
to hear that. As the secretary, I oversee the Vehicle Theft Prevention Council along with Chris McDonald. What we do is we divvy out those funds to allow each jurisdiction to develop an enforcement plan or take enforcement action. One of the things that you may not have realized statewide with the theft of the Kia and Hyundais, that was largely due to software updates, things like that. That allowed us to channel additional money into enforcement and also allowed them to work with individuals, whether they wanted some type of theft prevention device. And I'd like to highlight one of the departments that went the extra mile, the Montgomery County Police Department, realizing that the biggest hurdle in this whole process was people being able to take off work and get their vehicles worked on. They had those clinics held at their stations. And it's a game changer. And this is all one big collaboration under Vehicle Theft Prevention Council to understand the trends involved, whether it's enforcement, whether it's prosecution, because there's money in that goes to Baltimore City to help prosecute, Prince George's County to help prosecute. It's a multifaceted attack on an issue that really cripples citizens of this state. Some people take it for granted that they'll go out there and their car will be there, but it's not that their car is missing. It's that now you've impacted their quality of life. How do they get to daycare? How do they get to work? How are they going to get to the grocery store? All these things have a cumulative effect on the psyche of citizens.
Thank you for that response. I have one last question. Delegate McComas.
Not necessarily a budget question, but it's something that I really worry about, is the fact that everybody seems to have tinted windows that are all, you can't even tell if anybody's driving the car. And I worry about, the troopers that are on the interstates at night, and I worry about them getting shot or something because they can't see in the car that well. And I just, maybe it's, and are you able to get any help from that as far as the tinting of the windows? Because I just think it's dangerous when the tints are so dark and they're not obeying the law, from what I understand.
So the enforcement of the window tint law is twofold. The trooper, the law enforcement officer, has the option to issue a safety equipment repair order. That requires that window to go be inspected. Also with that, it gives us the data that we need based upon the inspection. Do we need to go back and check on certain inspection stations? As you know, the Maryland State Police has the Automotive Safety Enforcement Division. They are primarily responsible for inspecting service stations that do Maryland State inspections, one, to ensure that they're complying with the rules and regulations set forth in the state, two, that they're doing what we need to do to ensure each and every vehicle is safe and nobody is doing the proverbial pin whip. When you start to talk about, stopping a car at nighttime, I've been there as a young trooper. I worry about each and every law enforcement officer. That's a training component. Eventually, the kids that we have, and they're not kids, they're adults. Sorry for saying that. But, I've been doing this for over 30 years. This 159th Academy class, they're going to go through scenarios in daytime and nighttime, and that'll be amongst the scenarios. How do you deal with that situation? What tactics are in your favor? So it's something that we actively teach, and it's on our radar.
I guess what I'm finding is, from what I've been told by some of the folks that are over the years, though, the state police lobbyists and everything, that it's impossible to regulate that, with the detail shops and everything. They just kind of, people, in other words, there's supposed to be a standard of the stuff that you put on the car, that it can't be too dark that you can't see a person's driving the car. And I think it's just, anyway, I understand that you've got protocol that protects the officer, but it still kind of is, you worry about it. So thank you, sir.
Certainly, we're of the same mindset. 35% of the ambient light must shine through, and on the front windshield, it cannot go beyond the AS1 line. You do have shops that violate that. And if that comes to our attention, we will address that with those shops. I think one of the loopholes with that, you could have a car that you don't intend to drive on the roadway. And you think of some of the show cars or exhibition cars and car shows, or a limousine. When you start to talk about limousines, SUVs versus a simple sedan, the standards are different. So it's one of those things that we have to be actively engaged in. And we certainly appreciate any support that the legislature could provide on this topic.
Thank
I've got a quick, easy one. With the new leadership with the Department of Justice, the consent decree from 2022, will you all still be following the terms set by consent decree?
So I'm going to answer that question by kind of going back to the very beginning.
Sure.
I know that the media is reporting certain things. The judge has not ruled in this matter. One of the things that MSP differs from the other departments in the other areas of the nation that were impacted by this, we entered into the decree. The DOJ has gone to the judge and asked that it be dismissed. We do not know what the judge is going to rule. You know, that's a toss-up. It's up to the judge and obviously judicial review. However, MSP does intend to extract the richness of what we found out to improve our recruiting, retention, and make sure that we don't leave anybody out. The biggest part of this is we're seizing the opportunity to create our own test. We know the issue is with the post-test and the 80% rule. When you really look at it, this is a golden opportunity to create a test that fits exactly what MSP needs. And there's no doubt, you know, I think there are 30 other departments in the state of Maryland that use the post-test. We'll have a cutting-edge test that I'm sure other departments will look to use.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate the candor and the transparency. And as usual, any questions before we? Okay, thank you for being here, sir. We really
Thank you all
appreciate
for your time. I
time.
appreciate each and every one of you.
Next, we will move to Department of Veterans and Military Families. DLS, when you're ready. Thank you very much. And Mr. Secretary, you can approach either now or later. It's up to you. Take it away. Thank you so much, Ms. Rye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I am Yashodhara Rai, and I'll be presenting the fiscal 26 budget analysis for the Department of Veterans and Military Families, or DVMF, which was renamed by Chapter 11 and 12 of 2024. DVMF provides services and conducts programs, including outreach to assist the state's veterans, their families, and survivors. The department manages Charlotte Hall Veterans Home, which is the only assisted living and skilled nursing facility for veterans and their eligible spouses in the state. The graph on page 1 shows that the fiscal 26 budget for DVMF has decreased by $608,000, or 0.9%. Special fund lowers by 91%, majorly due to a change in funding mechanism for Charlotte Hall starting fiscal 25 after a new management contractor was onboarded in June 2023. Turning to page 2, the actual general fund reversion in fiscal 24 closeout was $2.6 million lower than expected. This was due to higher than anticipated operating costs for Charlotte Hall in fiscal 24. For fiscal 25, 2 cost containment actions related to fund swaps from general fund to non-general fund were approved by BPW in July 2024. These actions reduced the department's fiscal 25 general fund appropriation for the cemetery program by $500,000 and the Veterans Home program by $400,000. The department should comment on how these swapped funds are being replaced. There are 6 proposed fiscal 25 deficiency appropriations, which reduce the department's total appropriation by $5.8 million. General fund reduces by $2.3 million in total. This includes reduction to align funding with the actual fiscal 24 Charlotte Hall expenditures and a one-time expense of $825,000 to fund an ongoing litigation with the prior Charlotte Hall contractor. The department should provide an update on the ongoing litigation. Special fund reduces by $4.1 million in total. This includes aligning fiscal 25 funds in accordance with the new funding mechanism for Charlotte Hall and prior available special fund balances in the cemetery program, Veterans Home program, and Service Animal program. Federal fund increases by $613,000. In fiscal 24 and 25, special and federal funds deficiency appropriation added unspent balances from prior year. We request the department to brief on the reason for not expending these special and federal fund balances. On page 4, Exhibit 1 shows a total of $63.4 million in the department's fiscal 26 allowance. $49.7 million is for the operation of Charlotte Hall accounts. of which 95% is used for contractual services for managing the facility. Exhibit 2 on page 5 shows the changes in proposed budget. The largest reduction of about $1,200 million is related to the fiscal 25 special and federal fund deficiency appropriations, and about $800 million for Charlotte Hall operating expenses to align with fiscal 24 actual expenditures. This is partially offset by salary increases. On page 6, in fiscal 26, the department has a transfer and reclass of one position, resulting in no change in the department's personnel data. As of December 31st, 2024, there were 8 vacant positions in the department. Of these, 1.81 positions were above necessary vacancies. Moving on to key observations, Exhibit 3 on page 8 shows that Charlotte Hall's occupancy has increased as of December 2024 compared to 2023, but it is still operating under capacity. Admissions to Charlotte Hall were paused from April 2023 to November 2023 to conduct facility assessments and implement corrective actions. In its 2024 MFR submission, the department reported decrease in residents at the end of fiscal 24. To better align with fiscal 24 actual expenditures, the fiscal 26 allowance reduces estimated operating expense for the facility by $3.9 million. The department anticipates increase in residents in fiscal 25 and 26 and requests the department to comment on its plan to fund the increased residents after the reduced appropriation in fiscal 25 and 26. After the onboarding of the new contractor beginning June 6, 2023, there was a temporary funding mechanism in place from June 2023 through the end of fiscal 24. On page 9, Exhibit 4 shows the new funding mechanism starting fiscal 25, where Medicare, Medicaid, and private pay are deposited to general fund, and the state pays the contractor for expenses through general fund expenditures. The third quarterly report on Charlotte Hall staffing and federal ratings reports Charlotte Hall eliminating nurse agency and nurse aid agencies. This is because Charlotte Hall continues to staff above the state and new federal standards of a minimum of 3.48 total nurse staffing hours per resident day of nursing care. As of December 2024, Charlotte Hall received an overall rating of 1 star, with staffing receiving 3 stars and health inspections and quality measures receiving 1 star each. The department should comment on the decrease in its rating star rating and strategies to improve overall ratings. An annual recertification survey report was submitted on September 30th, 2024. This noted that Charlotte Hall was not in compliance with some of the federal regulations. The department should brief on corrective measures taken to address these non-compliance. Another annual survey of Charlotte Hall's resident funds was conducted and no major issues were identified. DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting the continued submission of quarterly reports on Charlotte Hall's progress. On page 11, the second observation highlights the department's new Maryland Joint Forces initiative. This was launched in November 2023 and aims to address 5 pillars: employment, food and housing, education, health, and volunteer services among veterans and military families. Currently, 20 organizations have joined this initiative and several events have been conducted. The department should provide updates on this initiative and its outcomes and the department's future plans. DLS also recommends adopting committee narrative requesting a progress report of this initiative. The final and third key observation highlights the strategic plan submitted by the Maryland Commission on Veterans and Military Families. This is in accordance with chapters 9 and 10 of 2024. The Commission's strategic plan aligns with the 5 pillars that were mentioned earlier and focuses on 4 areas, which are integrated military, civil, and communities, sustainable employment opportunities, comprehensive higher education opportunities, and pathways to stability. On page 13 are DLS's 2 recommended actions. Pages 14 to 16 are appendices, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Colleagues, do we have any questions for DLS? Seeing none. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Please take it away.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Members of the subcommittee, it's good to be here with you today. For the record, I'm Tony Woods, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Veterans and Military Families. I'm joined by our Director of Finance, Elena Charland. I want to start by saying thank you to Yasho, our DLS analyst, for her thorough review of our budget and good partnership throughout this entire process. Over the past year, it has been my privilege to lead DVMF in strengthening our services for Maryland's military-connected community. Our vision is for Maryland to be the best state in the nation to be a member of the veteran or military-connected community. We've processed over 5,000 VA claims free of charge, resulting in over $44.7 million in direct payments to veterans, and we've reduced wait times at our service locations across the state. We launched the first online application for the Maryland Veteran Trust Fund, and we awarded over $500,000 in both individual and organizational grants. We built a dedicated constituent services function, which I would also add that you and your colleagues are some of our greatest users of that program, helping to provide direct support to veterans who come into hard times or need assistance. And then finally, Charlotte Hall Veterans Home achieved joint accreditation, which is a well-regarded industry standard. And the quality measures have actually risen by 1 star from 1 to 2 stars now. And we have a detailed program in place to continue to drive improvement of our quality measures while we wait for the overall star rating to improve. Our 5 veteran cemeteries provided a final resting place for over 3,000 Maryland veterans and their dependents. And we have worked to reduce our vacancy rate to 8 pins, or a rate of 7%, with active recruitments likely to reduce this rate even further in the next few weeks. I'll close by saying we're in full support of the governor's allowance, and we welcome any questions. Thank you.
Colleagues, questions for the Secretary? Seeing none, I appreciated the conversation we had on the capital budget subcommittee hearing. And of course, you've been doing an incredible job. So thank you for the work that you do serving our veterans in Prince George's County. We have so many of them.
Absolutely.
One of them, my grandfather passed away years ago, but he was one of the lucky ones. So thank you for your work.
Appreciate
Colleagues,
that.
we're going to move on to, forgive me.
I just wanted to ask the Secretary a
got
brief
you. I
question.
see
It's very expensive for folks to go privately into assisted living, and I just kind of wondered what the cost was to the veterans that can go to Charlotte Hall, the individual, or if they are able to take their spouse there with them.
I can follow up with the exact cost, but one of the things that I would say, many other states have made the decision that operate a state-run veteran home, have made the decision to move entirely away from having an assisted living facility. The VA reimbursement, the federal VA's reimbursement rates are actually quite low. And so what it results in is it's not a profitable endeavor. We in Maryland have taken the different tack. We realize this is really, really quite important because of exactly what you mentioned, Delegate. It's incredibly expensive to find good long-term care options, especially at that age. But we think it's vital that we have this resource. The skilled nursing side is usually where you make more money because there's much higher reimbursement rates. And so what we're working on is making sure that as we improve cost performance on that side, it helps to continue to subsidize our assisted living facility. So we don't turn anyone away if they cannot afford to live there, which I think is actually another important promise that we're able to make to them. And so some folks are of no means or are at risk of becoming unhoused or homeless. And so we always welcome those individuals. So we don't want to make cost a barrier for them being able to live there. But we can follow up with the exact daily rate.
Yeah, I was just, because I know that in the private sector, it's outrageous. I mean, the other quick question is, I had heard that there was some plan to have some type of housing up in either Cecil or Harford County. And I was wondering if that's still available, that, kind of on the calendar, or if because of our budget problems, it's kind of been delayed.
So the good news is it absolutely is very much on our radar and is still a very significant priority of ours. You're probably referring to the home in Sykesville, which is in Carroll County. We're close to completing the design and engineering phase of that work. It should be done by June 30th. We'll have the design and engineering phase done and the environmental impact assessment. The challenge is actually not at the state level, but actually at the federal level. So the state did have to remove our $63 million from our dedicated purpose account, but that was because at the federal level, they have not funded their now $1.2 billion backlog of VA construction budget. Once that comes around, we've been in wonderful conversation with Secretary Grady. We know this is a priority of the governor, and they've both said that we can return back if, by some miracle, the federal government funds that VA construction budget. But our plan is to get all of the design and engineering work done and then be ready the moment that those funds open up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
Questions there. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I'm looking at the list of other people who are here, and I know that Mayor Cross from Glenarden is not here because I know her very well. And because she's not, that ends the hearing on the Department of Veterans and Military Families. And colleagues, we're going to move next to the Office of Correctional Ombudsman. And whenever you're ready, DLS, you can take it away. And Briley Wilson, you can, thank you very much. Right on time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Catherine Barber, and today I'll be presenting the fiscal 26 budget analysis for the Office of the Correctional Ombudsman, or OCO. OCO is an independent oversight entity responsible for conducting investigations, assessments, and reviews to ensure the integrity of operations at the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services and the Department of Juvenile Services. OCO oversees the new Adult Oversight Responsibility Unit and the Juvenile Justice Monitoring Unit, or JJMU, which was previously budgeted under the Office of the Attorney General. The Adult Oversight Responsibility Unit oversees and investigates the well-being of adults under DPSCS jurisdiction and custody, while JJMU does the same for children under DJS supervision. The fiscal 26 budget for OCO increases by $333,000, or 20.8%, to $1.9 million. Chapter 836 of 2024 established OCO effective July 1st, 2024. The act required the transfer of 4 JJMU positions and a little more than $600,000 in general funds from the Office of the Attorney General. Section 21 of the fiscal 25 budget bill appropriated $1 million in special funds from the Performance Incentive Grant Fund in the Department of Budget and Management. The budget language provided the special funds to support startup costs for OCO and the Adult Oversight Responsibility Unit. A fiscal 25 budget amendment transferred these funds. The majority of expenditures for fiscal 26 support personnel costs at 90% of the total budget. The budget also includes about $50,000 for contractual payments for the Correctional Ombudsman Advisory Board. This board currently has 4 of its 12 members appointed, and Exhibit 1 on page 3 breaks down the fiscal 26 allowance by spending area. Personnel costs make up a net $156,800, or 47% of the increase from the working appropriation to the allowance. Other increases fund standard operating costs for the office, and the proposed budget changes are illustrated in Exhibit 2 on page 4. The Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2025 includes a provision that authorizes the use of up to $1 million from the Performance Incentive Grant Fund for OCO operations each year beginning in fiscal 26. The budget, as introduced, includes a $1 million general fund reduction and a corresponding $1 million special fund appropriation under OCO, both contingent on the enactment of this legislation. For personnel, the working appropriation contains 7 regular positions and 6 contractual positions for a total of 13. In fiscal 25, 4 of those positions were transferred from JJMU, and 3 positions were created by the Board of Public Works. One of those full-time regular positions established in fiscal 25 is, of course, the Correctional Ombudsman, who was appointed in September 2024. In fiscal '26, all of those contractual positions are converted to full-time regular positions, bringing the total number of regular positions to 13. This is mostly administrative and program management positions. As of December 31st, 2024, OCO reported no vacancies, but after this analysis was written, I was informed that there was one vacancy for an executive administrator position that was in the final stages of hiring, so maybe we can get an update on that from the ombudsman. And there's one key observation in this analysis relating to the development of the office's information technology and managing for results performance measures. OCO has been working to establish its website, which is required in Chapter 836 of 2024, and goes hand in hand with the office's need for a case management system, which would enhance transparency and improve the office's ability to track trends, identify relevant policies, and respond to inquiries and complaints. As of January 2025, OCO and DeWitt did not have an estimate for the time or cost of either the website or the case management system, but OCO stated that they hope to have them running by the end of fiscal '26. OCO is currently using an internal process to track complaints and is publishing its reports to the governor's website. As a new agency, OCO has not yet specified or reported its key goals, objectives, and performance measures through a managing for results submission. OCO should specify what measures it is able to track with the resources currently available and discuss the goals and performance measures that will be reported in future MFR submissions. DLS concurs with the governor's allowance. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barber, for your analysis. Any questions for DLS? If not, Madam Acting Correctional Ombudsman Briley Wilson, please take it away. Welcome.
Thank you. It is official. I am actually, have received my appointment. So thank you, Vice Chair.
Congratulations.
Yes.
It's rare that this sheet is not exactly correct, so congrats.
Well, thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, members of the subcommittee, and thank you, Ms. Barber. The Office of the Correctional Ombudsman has hit the ground running. We have been interfacing and connecting with other ombudsmen who are effectively doing this job in other states. And we have effectively integrated the juvenile justice monitoring members of that, I won't say agency because they are now part of this agency, but we have integrated those individuals into this agency. We have purchased fuel-efficient vehicles that will keep our staff safe and allow them to travel the state to do this job efficiently. Our goal, of course, is to make sure that we follow the mandate of the state, of the legislation in terms of the inquiry on the metrics. We have, for the MFR reporting, OCO will track the complaints received, categories of complaints, and the number of investigations open. However, as a team, we will continue to work to finalize the metrics and will publish on the MFR with the fiscal year 2027 allowance. As on the correctional side, I am happy to say, even though I'm a staff of one right now, I have had the opportunity to visit all the focus facilities, begin to establish those relationships. So once the staff is fully on board, that we can also take the opportunity to onboard the staff so that they will also be able to establish those working relationships as well. We fully support the budget and look forward to continuing to work effectively and efficiently.
Well, thank you for getting right to it and hitting the ground running. We're here to help, so let us know what we can do to be of service. If you have any suggestions, DLS is always open, and again, we're always here to help as well. Yeah, so I assume other than a few of the things that you mentioned, if you have any other needs that you've identified, you can mention that now, or?
I think if I were to identify any challenges, the biggest challenge I do see is perhaps maybe the reclassification of contractual positions to PEN positions, which will occur eventually as the contractual positions become PEN positions. I don't know how it will affect the hiring just yet. I think about especially key positions such as the deputy ombudsman or the assistant attorney general, those roles. Those are key positions that require a lot more experience. And when I think about that, I think of those positions. I don't know if individuals will be as keen to take on those roles as contractual roles. So those are kind of things that keep me up at night.
Sure. Understood. Well,
But,
thank you.
Other than that, we're pleased with the appropriation.
We're glad to hear it. Any other questions? Delegate McComas.
There's an issue as far as monitors, and I don't have the answer, but how many are there juvenile justice monitors, if you know? If you don't know,
I absolutely know. We've integrated them effectively into the Office of the Correctional Ombudsman, and we in fact have hired another, and so we have 3 monitors currently, including the director. Not including the director, that creates 4.
And that's just for the juvenile services?
That's on the juvenile side. So my vision in terms of the agency is, and I apologize if you've heard me say this because some have heard me say this, I envision it as a tree with 2 branches, correctional oversight and juvenile oversight. And so on the juvenile side, we have the director, and then we have 3 other monitors at this time.
So now you don't have any contact, you only have contact with the folks that would be the monitors within the juvenile or the adult system for corrections or juvenile, right?
I'm sorry, I don't
Well,
understand
okay,
the question.
what I'm asking is I have an issue, and I don't have the answer about, I think we're supposed to have monitors monitoring the Department of Social Services, and but you wouldn't know anything about that, right?
No.
Okay,
I'm
that's,
sorry, I
and I figured you wouldn't, but I thought, you're here, I'm going to ask.
The Office of the Correctional Ombudsman strictly is responsible for oversight with the Department of Juvenile Justice and the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services.
Thank you. Well, real quick question, but they're all specially trained for their particular area that they're to monitor?
Absolutely. However, we consider ourselves one agency, while they will not switch between the 2.
Correct.
We have already started having monthly meetings, and we sit down and we talk about what our issues, our challenges, our successes are. And, while it's juvenile and corrections, a lot of there are commonalities still between the work, and we can learn from each other.
Now, what kind of educational background do they come from, the monitors that you deal with?
Well, it's a variety. We have social workers, we have lawyers like myself. I have a background in corrections, juvenile services, as well as an advocate. We have psychologists. It is a variety, and I think that's so important because it allows us to look at the work from different perspectives.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I know it's a little off subject, but
no, I appreciate the question. I think it's
somebody
important.
that knows what they're doing.
No, I think it's important, so I appreciate the question.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate, and thank you, Madam Ombudsman. Congratulations on the appointment, and also for being the first to be able to find an error on one of these sheets.
Thank you.
You have a great day, and you continue the great work. Colleagues, we're going to move next to Subsequent Injury Fund. Mr. Richards from DLS can give the analysis, and then Director Dodd can come and join us and bring your team. Mr. Richards.
Good afternoon. My name is Micah Richards, and I would want to thank the chair, the committee, and the great state of Maryland for allowing me to present before you today. I'm presenting the Subsequent Injury Fund, referred to as SIF, Fiscal 26 Budget Analysis. Starting on page 1, SIF compensates injured workers whose pre-existing conditions are worsened by current injury. The fiscal 26 budget increases by around 4.8% to $3.4 million. Page 2. Exhibit 1 shows the overview of SIF spending, where 84% of the fiscal 26 allowance supports personnel costs. Page 3, Exhibit 2 shows the largest spending increase of around $193,000 is due to fiscal 25 cost of living adjustments in increments. The largest decrease of around $75,000 is due to the state not providing prescription drug coverage for retirees anymore. Page 4. As of December 2024, one position has been vacant for less than 3 months. Page 5. Exhibit 3 shows the assessments collected increased by 0.4% in fiscal 24 compared to fiscal 23. Page 6. Exhibit 4 shows the fund balance increases by an average rate of 4.4% from fiscal 12 to fiscal 24 due to increases in revenues and interest earnings. Page 7. Exhibit 5 shows the average cost per claim increased by 23% in fiscal 24 compared to fiscal 23, which continues the upward trend since fiscal 18. Page 8. DLS recommends SIF to concur with the governor's allowance. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Are there any questions for DLS? Seeing none, Director Dodd, please take it away.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Vice Chairman, it's very pleased to be here today. My name is Edgar Dodd. I am the Director of the Maryland Subsequent Injury Fund, and I'm joined today by Mrs. Rose Hunt, who's our Chief Fiscal Officer. And we thank Mr. Richards for his in-depth analysis, and we also appreciate his request for the committee to act favorably on the governor's recommendation for our FY26 budget. It's a good time for the Subsequent Injury Fund. We're doing very well, and it's due to the dedication of the professionals that we have there in their service to injured Maryland workers. We have a tremendous staff of legal, claims, fiscal, and IT professionals who come to work every day with our mission in mind in service to injured Maryland workers, as I said. You know, it's important that I crow a little bit today about a recent completion of an IT and fiscal audit that was conducted by your colleagues in the Office of Legislative Services. For the first time in the history of the Subsequent Injury Fund, we had no findings, absolutely no findings on the fiscal or IT side. And that's a credit to the staff that we have there, and we're very proud of that, and I thought it was important to share it with you. And with that in mind, I'm open to any questions or comments you all may have.
Colleagues, any questions for the director? Seeing none, and I see the answer here, where we're talking about the $75 million reduction due to employee and retiree health insurance. And I know that's because of legislation that's sunset, but could you just talk to us about that $75 million? Who was able to take advantage of this prior to the sunset? Sorry, it says here.
What page are we on?
Page 3, the largest decrease of essentially.
Oh, $74,000.
There we are.
$74 million.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Sometimes these numbers look a little larger or smaller at different times.
That threw me off, $74 million.
You know, hey, yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's due to, as you said, it's the legislation where the agencies are no longer responsible for retirees, a certain portion of their health benefits, specifically prescription drugs. Beg your pardon?
No, $75,000.
Right.
Any other questions from colleagues? Seeing none, that ends our hearing today. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
And we're going to move on to our last agency, Maryland Department of Emergency Management, MDEM. David Propert from DLS will give the analysis. And of course, Secretary Strickland and your team, please join us when you're ready. Mr. Propert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chapter 287 of 2021 established the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, or MDEM, by combining the Maryland Emergency Management Agency from the Military Department and the Maryland 911 Board from the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. The fiscal 26 budget decreases by $34.6 million, or 3.8%, to $878.5 million. Exhibit 1 on page 3 provides an overview of the allowance. About 80% comes from federal pass-through grants, 13% is from 911 grant pass-through to counties, and the remaining components include the state share of the 911 grant, fire, rescue, and ambulance expenditures, personnel, and other operating costs. Exhibit 2 on page 4 lists federal funding by source, and the overwhelming majority is public assistance for presidentially declared disasters. Most of that specific grant is for the state's pandemic-related costs. Expenses that fall under this grant are submitted to FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which reviews and validates whether the costs are covered and then provides reimbursement. Moving to page 5, Exhibit 3 describes the overall decrease of $34.6 million from fiscal 25 to 26. This reduction is driven by a decrease of $36.9 million in special funds for the Maryland 911 Board to align more closely with anticipated spending. There are some increases that partially offset this reduction, including approximately $1.5 million for salary increases and associated fringe benefits, and $1.5 million for the AMOS grant program to support local fire, rescue, and ambulance services. Moving to page 6, there's a provision in the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act that would authorize the governor to transfer $9 million from the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund to the general fund. Exhibit 4 shows a number of grant programs that are funded by state matching funds and the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which MDEM uses or passes through to local jurisdictions, businesses, and individuals. On to page 8, the allowance contains 109 regular positions, including 2 new administrative positions in the State Disaster Recovery Division. As of December 31st, 2024, MDEM reported 20 total vacant positions, which is about 10 vacancies more than necessary to meet budgeted turnover in fiscal 26. Of these vacant positions, 5 have been vacant for more than 1 year. The Department of Legislative Services recommends deleting funding for the 2 new administrative positions. MDEM should instead reclassify 2 of the existing long-term vacancies. Page 9 discusses the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund, which is a special, non-lapsing fund with the purpose of providing low or no interest loans for local resilience projects that address the mitigation of all hazards, including natural disasters. This revolving loan fund was established as a result of the federal Safeguarding Tomorrow through Ongoing Risk Mitigation Act of 2021. The federal legislation established the Safeguarding Tomorrow Revolving Loan Fund to capitalize state revolving loan funds. Any projects that receive federal money from the Safeguarding Tomorrow Revolving Loan Fund must be approved by FEMA. Exhibit 5 on page 10 lists the projects that have applied for funds from both the federal and state revolving loan funds. A proposed budget amendment for fiscal 25 would appropriate $11 million from Maryland's revolving loan fund for the extended North Tunnel Project and the Maryland Avenue Culvert Project, both in Howard County. These 2 projects will be the first to ever receive money from the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund, and summaries of each project listed in the chart can be found in Appendix 2. After accounting for this $11 million withdrawal to fund the 2 projects, there will be a remaining balance of approximately $15 million. MDEM has noted that the number of applications for local jurisdictions was not substantial and indicated that the time and expertise required to develop a project proposal and application may have been too costly for some local governments. Going to page 11, MDEM reported in calendar 2024 that it was developing a 5-year plan for the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund. MDEM should comment on the status of the 5-year plan that it has been developing for the Revolving Loan Fund and provide updates on the approved awards for the project applications listed in Exhibit 5. Additionally, DLS recommends amending the BRFA provision to increase the authorized transfer from the revolving loan fund from $9 million to $12 million. DLS also recommends adopting committee narrative requesting that MDEM submit a report on the revolving loan fund, including efforts taken by the agency to assist local governments with developing project proposals and applications for future federal awards. In November 2024, MDEM submitted a report on state and local cybersecurity efforts as requested in committee narrative from the 2024 Joint Chairman's Report. The budget committees were interested in learning more about the state and local cybersecurity grant program. This grant program is funded through the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and is jointly managed federally by FEMA and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. MDEM collects local project proposals and forwards them to the federal agencies, which review them to ensure eligibility. The grant program also requires the establishment of a state cybersecurity planning committee, which determines the amount of funding, if any, for each eligible proposal. Membership of the Cybersecurity Planning Committee can be found in Appendix 3. Exhibit 6 on page 12, it shows the federal award, state share, local share, and non-federal match amounts from the state and local cybersecurity grant program. The non-federal match amounts came from the local cybersecurity support fund. Exhibit 7 on page 13 lists the jurisdiction, project title, funding request, and federal fiscal 2022 funding received for each of the proposals that were awarded funding by the Cybersecurity Planning Committee. Among 38 projects that were deemed eligible by the federal agencies, funding was distributed to 20 of them. A total of approximately $1.1 million was awarded to local projects, $11,000 to MDEM for workforce training, and $1.8 million was awarded to the Department of Information Technology for shared services for local jurisdictions. MDEM should comment on when federal fiscal 2023 and 2024 funding will be allocated and provide fund allocations by local project and by purpose. DLS recommends adopting committee narrative, requesting a report updating the budget committees on the status of federal fiscal 2023 and 2024 state and local cybersecurity grant program funding distributions and use of general funds in the local cybersecurity support fund, including the distribution of grant applicants and grant awards by jurisdiction. The report should provide a brief description of each project as well. And with that, I conclude the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Propert. Are there any questions from the delegates? Thank you, David. Much appreciated. Moving on. Thank you so much for being here, Secretary Strickland. Please take it away.
Great. Thank you very much. Vice Chair Ivey, members of the committee, thank you for having me here today. For the record, I am Russell Strickland, Secretary of the Department of Emergency Management. I appreciate the opportunity to update the committee on the department's activities and address the items contained in the operating budget analysis prepared by the Department of Legislative Services. I'd like to acknowledge David Probert, our new DLS budget analyst for this fiscal year, who has worked hard to understand the intricacies of our budget in just a few short weeks. I'd also like to acknowledge Christina Houre-Tunyan, our DBM analyst, who, as always, has provided invaluable guidance throughout this fiscal cycle. Accompanying me today is Anna Sierra, our Chief Development Officer and Legislative Officer, who will be available to answer questions as needed. To begin, I'd like to briefly highlight how MDEM has worked toward achieving our vision of a resilient Maryland where communities thrive. Over the last year, MDEM has activated the State Emergency Operations Center on a number of incidents stemming from a range of hazards with far-reaching consequences, including the Francis Scott Key Bridge response, weather events including flooding and winter storms, the counter-strike information technology disruption, the general election and inauguration, and most recently, the plane crash at Reagan National Airport. Our Joint Operations Center operates 24/7 to ensure we're ready to support state partners and local governments. We hired the department's first Assistant Secretary of Interoperability, Mr. Jack Markey, who recently retired from Frederick County Emergency Management. He will lead the state's public safety interoperability coordination to ensure efficient and effective communications is available before, during, and after emergencies for all of the public safety partners. You may have known or heard of that in the past as the Statewide Interoperability Coordinator, or SWIC. We published the first version of the Resilient Toolkit, a one-stop shop for anyone looking for resilient funding. It includes federal, state, nonprofit, and private sector funding resources to make it easier for communities who need support. We continue to make progress with the Mesonet system, with 20 sites operational across the state. Maryland Mesonet System, a statewide network of real-time meteorological stations that transmit critical weather data to inform the National Weather Service of conditions on a hyper-local basis and support alert and notification to the public of weather impacts. Every county in Maryland has identified at least a potential site for a mesonet station, and all but 3 counties have at least one station operational or a finalized site identified and scheduled for construction. And lastly, while this is not a departmental achievement, I wanted to share how excited I am that Governor Moore has been appointed to the Council of Governors, a bipartisan group of state leaders tasked with strengthening state-federal partnerships on key national security, disaster response, and military coordination issues. I'm heartened and deeply proud that Maryland will have a voice on this council. Governor Moore's appointment could not come at a better time given the recent discourse and uncertainty surrounding FEMA, its funding to states, and the broader federal emergency management system. Excuse me. Moving to the FY26 budget, I understand the state's current fiscal picture and fully support the strategically priority investments the governor made in this budget. You have our full written response to DLS's analysis, but there are 2 recommendations made by DLS which I would like to discuss today, as I think will negatively impact the emergency management system in Maryland. First, the State Disaster Recovery Fund. The Department of Legislative Services has recommended removing 2 new pins and associated funding from the State Disaster Recovery Fund. As we demonstrated in our written testimony, all of the vacancies the department had open longer than a year are in process of being reclassified or filled with candidates selected for 3 of the 4 vacancies. The positions for the State Disaster Recovery Fund are critical to developing and administering the program at the state level. Given the significant level of uncertainty surrounding the future of the Federal Emergency Management Agency and federal disaster aid, the department respectfully requests the committee maintain the positions and funding in the governor's allowance for the State Disaster Recovery Fund. Second, the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund. The governor's allowance reduced the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund by $9 million. And as I mentioned in my earlier testimony, we are supportive of the strategic investment decisions made by the governor in his allowance for fiscal year 26. However, the Department of Legislative Services has recommended a further reduction of an additional $3 million, which I think puts resilience funding at risk for Maryland communities. Federal changes in hazard mitigation and resiliency programs could significantly reduce the state's opportunities for funding for critical projects like flood reduction, coastal resilience, and environmental justice initiatives. And while the department has been highly successful in getting awarded grants under FEMA's companion programs, which is the Safeguarding Tomorrow Revolving Loan Fund, we do not have cash in hand yet. Given the administration's actions in clawing back other FEMA administrative funds, I believe there is a risk that federal funding awards may be revoked, leaving the department unable to meet current or future demand for resilience funding through the program. The Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund is an important part of the state's overall investment to reduce disaster risk for communities and is an important strategic backstop against loss of federal funding. Even if federal funding is not altered significantly in the next year, a further reduction will jeopardize Maryland's ability to seek new Storm Act funding, as we may not have enough of the required match to leverage available funds. We respectfully request the committee reject the additional reduction proposed by DLS in the analysis. I thank the committee for the opportunity to speak to these concerns, and I and Anna are available for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Colleagues, any questions? I do want you to speak just a little bit more to the impact some of these discussions have had on your agency. I know we've seen a lot of headlines, but have they directly impacted you yet? Have you all had grants or other funds clawed back, so on and so forth, from the federal government?
Not clawed back, but we are not permitted to do drawdowns on certain grants. In fact, most of the grants, in order to provide reimbursements.
Most of the grants, you said.
Most of the FEMA grants that we receive, yes.
Okay.
That would be, the Emergency Management Performance Grant, which is really the bread and butter for our department as well as the local jurisdictions, the Homeland Security Grant Program and the pieces of it. It also includes the Hazard Mitigation Assistance Program, which is referred to as, the Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities. Dam safety is in that. So it's all under a 30-day review, which legally, my understanding is by law, the federal government can do. We're waiting to see exactly what will come out of that review and what effect that may have, hopefully only on future grants.
Sure.
We all have signed agreements, that's when I say we all, the states, have signed agreements for federal fiscal years 22, 23, and 24 for money. And we expect that to be honored. Now, what this review may end up showing for the future is anybody's guess at this point in time.
Sure. Thank you. I know it's a really tough time for you. I was looking at the budget and heavily reliant on federal funds. So we're all hoping that that your agency is not on the chopping block. Goodness gracious. Delegate McComas.
I just have a question. I'm from Harford County, and years ago, we had a really bad incident where a guy came from New York, and there was no interoperability between you're probably familiar with it because it was pretty bad. A toll officer was killed. And so finally, County Executive Harkins, who was a delegate, they finally got it together so that the state police and the 3 towns could work together. We had a situation, obviously, in Pennsylvania and Butler where none of them, when Trump was hit with the bullet in Butler. Is Maryland pretty much interoperability now? And so if we ever had an issue, we'd be in good shape?
Yeah, and I'm a resident of Harford County too, and past director of the Department of Emergency Services there, and I will very proudly say to you, I believe Harford County has the best push-to-talk radio system of any county in the state. Put the challenge on the table, who wants to meet me? Well,
Frank Green actually threatened his lawyer.
Well, it was, I remember the event, and because of good planning, Harford County, again, is leading the cause with that. Because of actions that have happened with the previous SWICs, the entire state of Maryland, from a push-to-talk radio perspective, with fire rescue EMS and law enforcement is interoperable. We have capabilities of setting them up as they're en route to the scene to go to certain TAC channels and things like that. And in fact, we are the ones that push some of the buttons to make that happen. But it is a very robust system in Maryland.
Thank you.
So thank you.
We are part of the Harvard Bridge asset.
We are.
Where we're located.
We are.
TPG.
Yes. Yes. And that's, yes, I'll leave it alone. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions? If not, thank you so much for being here. Secretary Strickland, forgive me. And again, we are hoping that FEMA funds are not at risk.
We do too.
All right, thank you. And that will end the hearing for today's PSA Subcommittee. Thank you. That's the gavel.